Hi there, you're listening to Lee from the Plump DJs, and this is the Liverpool Connection Podcast.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the Liverpool Connection Podcast. I'm your host, Daz. This is my football and music episode, where I usually bring on a musician, producer, DJ to talk about music and football. But today, just like the Timo Maas one, he is not a football fan, but that's fine with me because we can talk about music all day long. I'm a massive fan, have been, since mid-90s. As people know me, breakbeat's been a massive part of my life. But yeah, I've got half a Plump on today. Part of the Plump DJs, DJ and producer. I've got Lee. Welcome to the pod, mate.
Nice to meet you, man.
Obviously, like I said, off air, you're not a football fan. Is that something you just like? Not
no,
like.
I mean, when I was at school, from the earliest age I can remember, I was sort of indoctrinated into Chelsea as a supporter because my dad was a massive fan. And I used to draw the Chelsea emblem and go to the Chelsea games when they're back in the second division when I was very young. I used to be sitting in the shed and supporting all the games. And I grew up, and as I sort of moved into my teenage years as a quite keen Chelsea supporter, we unfortunately got caught up in a bit of a violent situation in the shed where we were being coined by the opposing team. And back then it was a very volatile place to be in the grounds at Stamford Bridge. And I was very young. My dad and I were both quite scared by the episode. And at that time also I was sort of enjoying other sports for the first time: rugby, athletics, golf. I was going fishing loads. I was also kind of sport billy. And I think football in the 80s, as you know, was going through its kind of hooligan era. And it was the wrong age for me to experience that. Me and football went in two different directions. And I absolutely love the game, and I still love it now. And I've been privileged to go to see a number of sort of Premier League matches more recently, seeing Tottenham Hotspur. I've been in the box there 3 times in the last year or so, which has just been astounding. An astounding experience to be right immersed in that kind of in that theatre. And I've also seen the Arsenal women's team play as well, because my daughter's a keen footballer and she's just looking like she's 9. She looks like she's going to be moved into the St Albans City ladies team for kids. So yeah, I love the game, but I'm not a supporter. But like all sports, football's a fantastic sport. So I'm a fan of sorts, but not a day-to-day kind of fan. But it's a wonderful game, yeah. But music was another big thing for me in those teenage years, and really steered me along quite a specific pathway, which leads me to still be involved in it now. I'm 52 now, and I'm still doing loads of sports, and I'm still involved in music, which is wonderful.
I mean, yeah, going back to the 80s, that's the big thing. I've got a lot of mates. Obviously, everybody knows about Hillsborough, and the violence around football matches in the 80s turned a lot of people off. It really did. Once you stop going to the match, it's not like today where you've got YouTube, you can watch the highlights, you've got social media. Back then, there was like, if you don't go to the match and you really don't have a telly, or, you can't really know what's going on. A lot of people just, especially the violence, just got fed up with it. You fall out of love with football. I mean, for me, a couple of years ago, it was more because of the greed that's happening in football right now. It's all about money. We see with Man City, if you can, cook the books and all this stuff, it was just making me feel just sick inside. Just because, I went at a time in the mid-70s where everybody, spent the whole day just talking about football, your families, and then you come home, you watch Match of the Day, you have your tea with your parents, you know.
It's a way of life, isn't it? It's a way of life.
And you get a bit of shandy, you know. It's always great on a Saturday, and top of the pops as well. But you know, it's football's not for some, and I definitely understand that. You know, for me, it's obviously family, music, and football, and then clobber. Trainers are way up there. You know, probably with family.
Yeah.
The missus will be like, no, don't say stuff like that. But nah. So for you, like growing up, you know, for your roots wise, like what was being played in your house from your mum and dad?
I suppose a mixture of rock and sort of soul and disco, really. My dad was a big fan of Brian Ferry and Dire Straits and Phil Collins, and earlier than that, Roy Orbison, really, when he was a kid. And, you know, the rock and roll greats as well. So there was that on one side of the family, and then my mum loved her soul music, and they both loved disco at all the house parties. There's always disco being played in the 70s, and then also some, you know, later on there'd be sort of rock and roll, little rock anthems being played. So that was the glue, you know, not too dissimilar to yourself, I heard earlier, and that sort of stayed with us, really. So I think disco, yeah, really a firm party favourite in our household. So that I'm used to that 4/4 beat as well. So
yeah, I think it was the same for me, especially like New Year's. You know,
yeah,
you'd start with like the Status Quo Slade stuff, as most I think most families do, to get the party rocking at your house. And then the disco started coming in, and it's weird because, you know, my dad's a Brummie. And he went to school with Ozzy. So he was a hardcore rocker. But to see him like dancing to disco was just absolutely like piss myself laughing. You know, I mean, my dad was full on, you know, when he was growing up with the studded wristband and like the, you know, leather jacket with all the stuff on it. And just to see him like dancing to disco, I was like, wow, you know, times have changed. But yeah, I mean, it is weird how disco has set the tone for like house music. You know?
Yeah, it did, yeah.
Living in America, I mean, for me, I've only been over there, you know, I wasn't over in the 70s, 80s. But the 70s, it was like a dirty word, disco, you know? I mean, they were burning disco albums.
Yeah.
That's quite bizarre, like for me. You know, it takes you back to like burning books because they've got stuff in that people don't appreciate. But yeah, I mean, for you, you know, growing up, your teenage years, when did you start, like, were you going out to clubs? Were you getting involved in like the what kind of scene were you into?
When I was at school, I sort of kind of friendly with a lot of people, but I didn't really have my own sort of crew of friends. And so I put a lot of effort into sports, really. My sister at the time, in my later school years, was going raving. She was quite young to be doing that in her 15, 16, to some of the illegal raves. So I was kind of, I've got a twin sister, so I was kind of quite surrounded by that music through her, really. But in my own way, I wasn't really getting involved. It wasn't until I went to university and I started getting more and more involved with that when I was sort of 18, 19. And I started putting on parties just after that in central London in the 90s. Just after a recession, really, out of necessity, because I couldn't get any work. I wanted to become an architect and I wasn't clever enough, and there wasn't any work in the building industry because of the recession. So I was putting on parties to make money and to get my mates together and for fun. So I was programming myself as a warm-up DJ, and I was doing the door and handing out flyers, and we used to have break dancers come down, and I used to invite DJs to play and used to pay them to play, just in a small venue in Caledonian Road, a sort of big pub. And so things moved from there really, and I've become more and more kind of implanted in dance music. So yeah, it was. It's always been there. It's funny how it opened out for me really through necessity as well as desire. So yeah.
Well, when did you get your first pair of decks?
I was living in Ickenham back then with my friends. I think I was about 20, so probably quite late compared to some people. But I was always trying to recording tape to tape when I was a kid. But there was two people in my life that I met along the way. One of the guys called Chris Gibbs, who was at my junior school, and he was the man who had turntables in our area, and albeit at the time they were sound labs, I think belt drives. And then he got some 1210s, and we all used to go around to his garage and listen to him play hip hop and electro and early funk breaks and soul music, and we used to love that. And that really, really inspired me, really. And he was the first guy to sort of give me the wisdoms that led me to get my own turntables. And then the other guy that was quite influential was a guy called Matt from the Freestylers, who was previously in a band called Strike, who had a top 10 hit, or many top 10 hits. And he used to love his house music and let me DJ on his 1210s. And for a couple of winters or summers, he used to let me go up to his room and just learn on his turntables. So invaluable time there and a great grounding, really. So that's where I picked up my sort of limited skills.
There's nothing like, practicing on the sound lab first. When you actually get on a pair of techniques, you're just like, oh, it's like heaven. It's so bizarre. I was like talking to Chris, plastician, and
right, yes,
he was telling me like he got his first pair of decks and cost like 130 quid. His mate sold him like two decks and a mixer. I was like, you can't even get a needle for that these days.
No, yeah, it's so expensive.
A stylus, it's just mental. But yeah, once you played on the sound lab, you can play on anything. And, so how long did you DJ for before you started, like, wanting to actually get in a studio and start doing your own stuff?
Well, my first kind of first gig I did was for someone's birthday, where I was using 1210s at the Crown and Sceptre in Uxbridge, and it was like a 19th birthday, I think. Might have been an 18th. And I remember I just got a first copy of Josh Wink, High State of Consciousness, and I'd kind of weaved my way and badly mixed most of the set, but when I got to the end, I knew I had this absolute banger to play at the end, and it just tore the house up, really, which was great. So I got great reaction from that first set, and that's kind of stayed with me, really. But yeah, then it was the sort of London era, trying to put on break dance dues and playing breakbeat in the 90s, and I used to play as a warm up, so I really learned that. Empty dance floor, building up the dance floor, getting people's toes tapping and really just getting things cooking without, overheating things so that the guest DJs could come on and really take the floor to the next level. So that was a good seat of learning for me.
Yeah, I think, especially in this new generation, I think, warm-up DJ, you can still get to play the bangers. And I think warm-up DJ is one of the most special DJs, because he's the one that sets the tone for the night. You've got to hold back, not play what the main DJ is going to play. And I think everyone needs to basically start there and learn the craft. And I think it's kind of lost these days, especially with the influencers, influence DJs and all that rubbish, the sync button, and, you can go on YouTube and just see DJs just pounding it out at 9 o'clock at night. And the art of the opening DJs, to me, has been lost.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best way to learn, is get out there and get a warm-up slot in a club, even if you're not getting paid and no one's in the venue at that time. It teaches you the best lessons, and you really have to humbleize, if that's a word, humbleize yourself, lose your ego to try and make the event, set the scene for the booked people, and it's a great way forward. It really does help you. Later on, I mean, I have shows now. I mean, you always share the best bits on social media, but there's still shows where things are going quite right, and without being able to shoot from the hip and read a room, you're just not going to get good result. And I'm very fortunate nowadays that I'm mostly getting good results from most of the shows. You know, there's always going to be, you're always going to get a duffer from time to time, but yeah, I'm really thankful of having that kind of long training. It's probably why I'm still hanging on in there, because I've had all that.
I think breaks, you know, it encapsulates a lot of things, you know, funk, soul. I mean, we've gone through early funky breaks, big beat, new school breaks, you know, so I think we've covered the whole thing. What I like about it is it's always stayed underground for me. You know, yeah, there's been some top 10 free, you know, obviously freestylers and stuff have hit the top 40, but it's always stayed underground and humble. And it's always, you know, I think for breaks, mid 2000s was probably the peak where everybody was playing breaks. I mean, you had Sasha playing breaks, you know, everyone was putting it in their sets, and it kind of went down a bit. And I'm all right with that, you know, because I think it made the break scene grounded. And what's your thoughts on that? Because I like what I'm seeing again, you know, just like the Ministry of Sound show. You've got nothing but breaks DJs, but different, you know, different style of breaks, and that was great to see again.
Yeah. Well, there's a 20-year cycle very evident at the moment. I mean, the lockdown put a bit of a snag in the works there, because there was, strange developments going on for 2 years while we weren't out and about. But, you know, we're looking 2000s, as you say, was the big time for breakbeat, and we're now, 20 years on from that, and it's all happening again. Actually, what's wonderful is the same people are coming out again, which they found their feet and their voice, and they're coming out en masse. We just did Stanton sessions at London, biggest breakbeat lineup I think London's ever seen. The average age in the crowd was, sort of 30s, 40s, and some 50s, but just loads of people, a fantastic atmosphere, and real kind of. And the sold out Ministry of Sound nightclub, which is such a wonderful thing to do. So, yeah, I mean, I was obviously, when the breakbeat scene sort of started to go downhill a bit, it was a very tough time for everybody involved, promoters, label owners, DJs alike. You know, we were all scrabbling around trying to work out how to make some ground, and when the ground was falling away, but we were right at the front running of that scene, so we've got to take some responsibility for that. But I don't quite know what we could have done to change that. We did everything in our power to keep making cool music that was non-compromising. Like you say, we never really went for the big bucks, or always tried to make the music innovative. And the scene just changed. There were too many guys, not enough girls coming out, and just the atmosphere just went downhill. But you've got to look at societal change as well. I mean, every new generation that comes through, say, there's overlaps, but every 10 years, each new generation's re-own stuff and remake the environment and change the environment and make it their own. And you always get that. I mean, if you look at the 20 years before breakbeat, I mean, house music came to the fore. Then there was progressive house and Sasha and Digweed, these gods going around the world playing to massive crowds. And then suddenly their numbers started to drop. And there was actually a real drop in dance music generally. And that kind of left a gap that breakbeat came along and filled. And as you say, in the 2000s, a lot of those bigger house DJs were struggling to get shows. And we were getting shows everywhere, the biggest nightclubs in the world, the biggest festivals in the world. And I think that was kind of typical of this 20-year cycle. There was a gap there that was filled, and the yin to the yang, house music to breakbeat. That's the way I kind of see it. And all we've seen subsequently is then that moving over again, and another sort of 10 years of dominance of house music, which has changed again now back to vocal rhythms. We've seen drum and bass, massive resurgence after lockdown, and now breakbeat and breakbeat garage, and the tempo's coming up. Trance is making another bit of a comeback, and fast house at the moment, similar to what it was 20 years ago. So it's just very interesting to see that, and I'm very thankful that we've got a second crack of the whip.
Well, how did you and Andy meet?
We met as friends, actually, mutual friends, freestylers, Matt Cantor, and I met him at university, and I met Andy. We used to go out raving together, and he was making music with Matt as Strike, and Matt started making stuff with Aston as freestylers, and Andy was doing stuff on his own as Bowser, and I think Andy wanted to get more gigs, and I was putting on these parties, and I wanted to get in the studio, and I already started DJing on my own as Lee Frescanova. I was working with Frescanova Records, and sort of the big beat, breakbeat label run by Dave and Vicky from Fresh Records, and A&R in Matt and Andy. And I was in there working as a runner in the label, and Andy wanted some more gigs and I wanted more studio, so we formed the Plumps and shared what we had. So now Andy and I were a double act, and I was in the studio 3 or 4 days a week working with him in his studio in Soho. So unfortunately that's still going on as well. I was there yesterday. So yeah, our relationship is solid as ever, and we're really enjoying making music together still. So
yeah, that's good. You know, I mean, Plump Nights Out is iconic for me. It's just a well put together album. You know, there's a lot of albums back in the 2000s where you can tell some of the tracks are just fillers, but from yours and Andy's, from track one all the way to the end, it's just non-stop. Like, you know how people will go, well, you know, I'm taking the listener on a journey. Is, you know, that's just a load of bollocks. Like a lot of albums, I'm sorry, you haven't taken me anywhere. You've just taken me A to Z. That's it. But for you lot, like every single track was just brilliant.
Thank you.
And I can't thank you enough, just because, like, an eargasm. You know, 2 of my favourite albums from the break era, and if you haven't listened to them, please go and check them out, because absolutely it'll get your toes tapping and your head nodding, and that's breaks for you, you know.
Yeah.
But when you first finish an album, do you look at each other and go, this is it, this is gonna, you know, get us up there? I mean, because I always like to know, like, you know, what a producer actually thinks after they finish the album. Like, do they think, like, you know, this is going to propel us? Is this just a stepping stone? Yeah,
I mean, we every time especially back in those days, we knew we suddenly realised we were onto something, and you know, we'd hear rumours of like Sasha playing "Remember My Name" in one of his gigs in the States, and you know, back then there was no mobile phones really. And so you'd hear these rumours and it would just fuel your fire, and you realised that people were listening. So every time you got in the studio, it was like, this record could change your life, you know? So, and when we made records like Scram or War Galaxy, that remix, we had so much fun, and we just, you're like kids in a sweet shop, because you're full of so much positivity and you feel you can take things anywhere. But I mean, to reflect on those 2 albums, the first one was actually a bit of a retrospective, because nearly all those tracks, if not all of them, had already been made or were actually released. So in a way, it was like us looking back at the ignition part of our career being the late 90s, and we'd signed a few records to Finger Licking Records, and we were like, well, let's put all these singles together on an album, do a mixed version, and people can get them separate on vinyl. And it's more of a kind of collation of a retrospective. That's one of the reasons why the styles in that album are so varied. Everything from disco influenced War Galaxy, which was right at the start of our production career in the late 90s, to the freshest stuff we were making then and there in 2000, 2001, I think the album came out in November. And it was like we were already so buzzed up at that time about the reaction of those tunes. So there wasn't like a moment where we went, this is it. We would already felt that we had all this quality there, and I suppose probably that's one of the reasons why it doesn't feel like there's any fillers, is because most of them have been proven in the DJ world at least, and some of them had already been on release, so we'd already had great feedback. But then Orgasm was more like your second album, where it was a few years in between. We'd both been touring loads, we'd both been partying too much, and we were suddenly like, we've got to do this album. So that was much more pressure for Andy and I, and it's a classic scenario, isn't it, for most bands. And your second album, like you all at that point and now want different things for the future. You both kind of have had loads of interviews for the first time. You're developing ego issues, and it's a classic scenario. And there was a lot of pressure on the label back then, Finger Licking Records. They were trying to put for our help, trying to shape us. And trying to use their wisdoms to try and get the best out of us. We were trying to make sure we were independent, so there was a lot of to and fro between us and the label, and a lot of arguments. And then we were using Fabric for the first time as well. Our residency there, we were able to road test these tunes, but then that gave us once again a different look on these records, because Fabric's sound system, as you know, Main Room especially, was legendary. And whereas all the previous records have been road tested in back rooms, because we weren't known. We were playing little second rooms in nightclubs or back rooms in pubs. So, playing Scram to about 100 people in a back room of a pub. That was the road testing of that record. Whereas some of the tunes in Orgasm were on the biggest sound systems that the world had to offer at the time. So much more complex album, much more varied Orgasm, but still some huge records in there for us, and wonderful guidance from Finger Licking as well. We were very, very heavily involved in relationship-wise as friends of all the other artists on that label, and it was a family. We were part of this Finger Licking family at that time. So both albums are very much a Finger Licking thing in a way.
Well, how hard is it though to keep your ego in check when you do have like a successful album and successful records, and you're touring all over the place, and like you said, partying and stuff, but you've still got to like get in the studio and put these songs out.
Yeah, well, I suppose when you're that. I've only recently found out what ego actually really is, so I can address it now. But back then, I didn't know what it was. It was just a word that people used once in a while when someone was being a bit of a whatever. But back then it was tough, because we were friends, but we all had our own agendas, and we all had our own voices, and we all had things we wanted to get put across. We had great artwork surrounding Finger Licking Records, courtesy of Gem. And then great creative ideas and overseeing business by Justin and Abel, and everybody had their own ideas and wanted to have their own input, and we were all proud of the results we were getting. So it was awkward, but I suppose the same kind of pressures a band, a rock band has. Classic scenario you hear of, huge mega bands like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones going through those problems of second and third album, and people's egos and people losing their grounding a bit because of partying too much or drinking too much, or they're not feeling valued in the team, so you can get problems there, or everyone's the other classic one is when people have a dream and they set off to do something like your first album. Nobody actually believes that's really going to happen. You just hope it's going to. When it does happen, no one's got anything worked out. What are we doing now? Where are we going to take this now? So everyone's then got their own ideas, but that's where you get a lot of arguments. What people should really do is, even if it feels a bit big-headed, think, this first album's going to work. We're going to do really well with this first album. What are you going to want to do then? Do you want to do another one, or do you want to call it quits? Or are you going to want to start a solo career? And that nobody says that. So you do the first album, and everyone goes, "Oh, I want to start a solo career," and everyone goes, "Well, what about us?" Or so it's easy to say that looking back, but we obviously had some of those problems. But we also weren't making pop music, so we didn't have the pressures of a pop band, you know, being recognised walking down the street. We were famous in our own environments. In nightclubs, people would recognise you and you'd be signing autographs, but then you leave the nightclub and you're back to Joe Bloggs again. So we were lucky in a way there because it kept us a little bit more grounded maybe than some pop acts that maybe had a number of hits in the charts and maybe were being recognised when they was going out for dinner, you know. So that's when, I suppose, ego can really start getting affected.
Well, I mean, it seems to me like the break scene was one big family, and there wasn't too many egos, and that's just coming, you know, looking from the outside in. It looked, you know, like the record labels were all kind of in tune with each other. What's your thoughts on that? Because like I said, you know, I just buy the albums, buy the 12 inches, but you're actually, you know, making the records, you're having to talk to, you know, labels and stuff. How was it? Was it an actual family? Were you like, was there some stabbing in the back? Like, you know how people are when they meet you in the club. Hiya, mate, I haven't seen you in a while. It's great to be DJing. Oh, you fucking twat.
Yeah. I suppose, yeah. You're always going to get some of that. I mean, when we were very successful for a short period of time in that scene, and we did get some animosity, and you know, everyone's got their own take on it, and I'd kind of expect that, you know, if you suddenly branch forward, you're in the line of fire, you know. So we got fantastic adoration on one side, but then we also got, you know, gunned down by a few people on the other side, and it's going to happen, really. So I don't have any problems with that. But it was a family. I mean, there was the Blake Bowl Awards for a while at the start there. It did really feel like that. You know, we were out there, you know, coming together as a genre. It's just such a shame that just after that, the genre started struggling, and that's when we started seeing a lot of bitterness coming through, people pointing fingers, and that's just inevitable when you get a cultural shift like that. And I don't, you know, then you get some toxic behaviours, and we all lost our way, and you know, things came off the top levels for us at that point. But we're lucky now, as I say, we've gone down, we've come back up again. We're all a bit older, a bit more wise, much more thankful. And I think at the moment, the atmosphere in the venue on the weekend, if that's anything to go by, it's a very special place for us now, because we're all, you know, much more appreciative of the situation we're in.
Well, I've got to ask you about Pray For You, because, you know, Gary Newman is an absolute legend.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
Well, we always, you know, dreamed of doing a track with him, and Abel at Finger Licking Records, he's got so many contacts, and he seems to know, he's made so many friends, he seems to know everybody in the industry, and everyone really respects him. He gets a lot of love, and we were just like, oh, you know, can you get in touch with them? And before you know where we were, we had his telephone number, and I was phoning him up, and his wife answered the phone. I said, "Is Gary there?" She went, "Gary," and I was like, "Oh my God!" You know, for me, it was that guy that with a white makeup on his face, with cars on telly, you know, and I just couldn't believe it. Very, very surreal. But we got too overexcited. I think Andy will agree. Unfortunately, I think we did a good job of the record, but we were both well out of our depth at that point, and under a lot of pressure. As I say, Eargasm was a lot of pressure for us. Fortunately, Mick Coombs was on the scene there, well and truly, had his own career flying, and he did a fantastic remix of that record for us. And I think the combination of that remix and our original meant for quite a strong release. But looking back, I'd have preferred to have taken it a slightly different way, but you can't really look back. I think what it was, we did the best we could, and a lot of people really love that Pray For You record. It's very emotional, and an interesting look on his look on America, really, and how he was feeling about some of the stuff that's going on in the States at the time. Yeah, and he's more recently done a fantastic album with, I can't remember remember his name. But he's done another famous British electro producer. He's the sort of father of British electro. Can't remember his name. Errol Alkin. Errol Alkin produced his album. I think it came out a couple of years ago. But yeah, really good Gary Newman album. Errol did a fantastic job. I mean, he's the right man for the job there. So fantastic, yeah.
Yeah, you got to pinch yourself. I mean, Gary Newman, and then you've remixed Orbital. Funny Break is one of my favourites. And, you've done Fatboy Slim, Dead Mouse, on and on and on and on. I mean, you still pinch yourself going, we're still in this game. We're still, doing what we love.
Yeah. Yeah, I've never really stacked them up like that, but now you say...
Oh, here comes the ego.
Yeah. I suppose if you do stack them up, it's pretty special, really. I mean, the Dead Mouse one was mad. I mean, we were being looked after by 360 management, and they got us this slot and remixed Dead Mouse, and then we're DJing before him at the O2 on New Year's Eve. I'm like, no, it wasn't New Year's Eve. It was a special Dead Mouse event, I think. But yeah, wow. And Norman too, and everyone loves a 303. We love that, making that remix. And I met his son recently. He's a fantastic DJ, Woody. I DJed with him at Shambhala Festival. He's a high energy DJ, fantastic. And fantastic when you look back. But it's just important to live in the moment and what we're doing now, what have we got to do now. And at the moment, I'm feeling really enthusiastic about this resurgence. People wanting new breakbeat and wanting to hear the old stuff, and the fact that the tempos have gone up a little bit lately. It means now we can play the older stuff, which is sort of 134-ish, around some of the more new stuff, which was always a problem 10 years ago. A lot of people making like 128, 127 breakbeat, and that just didn't sound good when you play it next to a 134, 135 BPM breakbeat track. So it's very hard to program the sets, but at the moment it's a real sweet spot. You can literally play something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue, all the same tempo, take the sets anywhere. It's great.
Well, it seems like, Spain has always been a massive, breaks, just insane. I mean, I remember Simon Shackleton, Elite Force, posting stuff about him playing in Spain to thousands of people. And same with Eastern Europe as well. Hungary, massive into breaks. So I think that's what's kept breaks alive. With the States, obviously Florida breaks was the big Hoodia, DJ Icy, Baby Ann. And then again, same within the States, it kind of faded. It's always been there, but it was massive in the late 90s, early 2000s. But again, just to see it still healthy just makes me smile. And it's great for, the younger generation to hear the older breaks as well, put in with, the new stuff. And then just like you were saying before, how drum and bass has done a whole 360, is great because you're seeing the kids out now, going nuts to drum and bass tunes that were made 30 years ago. So it makes me chuckle, but that tells me these tracks have stood the test of time. And same with yours and Andy's tracks. Still sounds fresh today. And that's what I love about it. The productions that you did and are still doing are still high quality. If you go, anybody can get on Beatport, and there's thousands of crap, absolutely thousands and thousands of just dog shit music. And I'm being honest. I can't hide my feelings. It's so easy to make your own track and put it out. You don't need a record label. You can just basically put it out yourself. But the problem is, it's not produced very well. It's not engineered very well. And I miss that. If you play some of the stuff that's on Beatport in a club, it'll sound like you're basically in your nan's kitchen. It just doesn't have the warm bass lines, and your tracks have stood the test of time. That's one big thing I can say about yours and Andy's, as well as, you know, a lot of Meet Katie stuff, Dylan Rhymes stuff, still sounds absolutely amazing to me.
Fantastic. Attention to detail back then was great. You know, the process was harder. It was harder to make music. I mean, when we made Bumper, I mean, that took 6 weeks. We did a Bumper Electronauts remix. It took us 6 weeks to make. We refused to put tape on our mixing desk because we couldn't ever return the levels exactly, because we were such fanatics on making sure things sounded, you know, absolutely 110%. So we'd leave the record up on the desk, so we couldn't leave it. Once the record was in process, 6 weeks that record, and we were in 3 days a week, more than that, working 11 in the morning until 2 or 3 or 4 in the morning on just 2 NS10s and a Mackie desk and as much, you know, knockabout analog equipment as we could find. But in the early era, it was just a couple of Andy synths and guitar pedals, and just trying to be as innovative as we could with the kit we had, you know, using guitar pedals in line and trying to, you know, distortion. And we used to put our ears to the floorboards, the floor upstairs, to check the sub levels, because all we had was NS10s. We used to do, when we came to the mix time, we used to do a drinking test. So we used to drink a load of beer and come in and listen to the record again, which generally meant we were more emotionally pulled into the record, but all of a sudden we were like, turn the tops up, you know. For some reason, when you get drunk, it seems to do that. And we used to do smoking weed tests, and smoke a load of weed, then have a listen to the record again, see what it sounded like, and make some alterations. And sometimes we even used to do recreational activities and get a bit high and have another listen, just to have all these kind of layers of processing on the record. And we had to do it because we didn't have the equipment. And then 15 years later, you can make everything on, you know, do everything on one piece of kit. And there was a quality drop off. And like you say, there was no vetting process, because you didn't need a record label, which would have been one vetting process. You wouldn't have had to get the record externally mastered, which was another vetting process. You could distribute it from your own bedroom without anyone saying it was good or bad. So it was another vetting process. So although there were still bad records around it back in the day, and there always has been, it still had to go through a number of hands before it got out to the general public or past a number of ears. So there was always that slightly higher level of quality at the end of the result. Now you've got to really wade through, like you say, wade through so much to get the quality. But the quality is coming through. Some of the young producers of breakbeat now are making some fantastic records, some fantastic music coming out of Spain, just from all over the place. You've got to have your net wide, but still great. And then the greats are still making great music. Look at Stanton's, you know, Crafty's making some of the best music I think he's made ever. Like some of his original productions at the moment, like 4 Days, astounding, unique style, uncompromising, brilliant. And freestylers at Matt and Aston under the Pirate Jams sort of moniker, and they've got a new album coming out. It's just full of killers, you know, great tracks. And so just, good time to be doing what we're doing.
Yeah, well, I want to talk about your Fabric residency as well. You know, you did it for 10 years, and you know, that Room 1 is like, that was my club to go to. You know, when I come back home, obviously I grew up, you know, Liverpool, Cream. I never heard a breaks track ever at Cream. It was all, you know, house music and trance and prog. But when I come to London, it was always Fabric, just because of the sound system and the booth. You know, I was able to get in there one time, and
oh really?
Oh my God, yeah! And it was like a spaceship. It's especially because, you know, it's just that little like slit as well, your viewing slit, and you know, and what I loved about it too is wasn't all about like just looking at the DJ, which I think gets lost a lot as well these days. Everybody just bass is the DJ. Fabric, you go off on your own little adventure, you know, and because the sound system was so clean, you didn't need to stare at the damn DJ for, you know, a couple of hours to, you know, kind of get what the DJ's giving you, because the sound was so good. But I mean, 10 years at Fabric is a long time to be a resident.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and they've had so many incredible nights. Again, what I love about Fabric, it's not a breaks club, it's not a drum and bass, it's not dubstep, house, it's every genre. I loved how they set a night, you know, and they do have like the different rooms. I remember Mob Records having a little Tayo, and it was just great to hear. And even though it's all breaks, it's all different. You know?
Yeah, it was always kind of, I think it's Keith's idea originally that it should be the kind of vessel to the music, and the music, it shouldn't be defined by the music. It's almost like it should have a fluidity and be purely subjective in terms of what people thought Fabric were, and I think he achieved that really. And yeah, fantastic to be a part of that. We you know, I went out recently for dinner with Steve, who set Fabric up with Keith, and the work and effort that went into that and making it what it was just phenomenal. We were begging for a show there, and fortunately we got asked last minute to stand in. I think Fatboy Slim couldn't make the show, or someone on the bill couldn't make it, and I think it was Abel got a tip off. We got a tip off through Curly, managed to get ourselves in there, and just smashed it. It was and then we got asked to be resident there, and that you know, looking back, I just never really realised how important that was. It was there was so many big things happening for us at that time. We toured with Orbital. We were playing the biggest festivals around the world. And then every time we played Fabric once or twice a month, you know, there was 700 people outside in the queue, and a decade of people going to that venue. And not just for us, but the Stantons as well, with their night. Breakbeat being listened to, you know, as one of the most, if not the popularest genre of music at the time. So, yeah, fantastic. And it really shaped our sound by having that club as a experimental place for our records. We used to get our records cut through Shane Heathman's mastering. He's still the master to vinyl, and I used to go and pick up vinyl off him at 2 in the morning. He used to leave them outside in a box, and for me to pick up, sometimes because he was working late on into the night, and then I'd drive to Fabric with these, you know, test pressings in my car and play, you know, open the box in the DJ booth and smell the test pressings. Always the acetates always used to smell very distinctively, and then play these things for the first time. The first time we played Scram, you know, and it was like I couldn't believe it. That feeling of 1 minute being in the studio and then 24 hours later having a pressing of the record and then playing it on Fabric's amazing world-class sound system. Phenomenal.
I want to ask you, like, obviously Gary Newman, pinnacle to have a vocalist like him. Is there anybody that you would like to collab with vocal-wise?
Vocal-wise? Yeah, we are doing some collaborations at the moment, but I can't. It's kind of a bit secret. But producer-wise, I mean, we're just about. I think we're hopefully getting someone in the go with a guy called Guau, who's a Spanish producer, fantastic breakbeat producer, and he's just done a remix for us, and it looks like we're getting a collaboration on the way. He might be looking at a track of ours called The Soul Vibrates, which I think was on the Eargasm album. I think he might be looking at collaborating with us on getting another version of that going, and another tune we're doing as well. So that's really cool. But I mean, we've just started this new thing called Daybreaks, which is a daytime breakbeat kind of brand, really, to try and ignite that daytime market, that demographic of people that have always wanted to go out but didn't want to go out till silly o'clock in the morning because maybe they felt they were too old. And or maybe they just, had too many responsibilities, want to get out during the day and dance to breakbeat. So we're trying to get in, get something going there. So that's taking up quite a bit of time. And we've got Australian tour coming up in March, April next year. And I just think I've got some Asian shows in the brewing as well. So things are going to be quite busy touring and a bit of studio. And we've just done a replumped sort of remastering project for Replump Volume 1. And we've just started on Replump Volume 2, which should be out hopefully in the middle part of next year. So there's just so much work on at the moment. It's fantastic.
Well, work's good, right?
Yeah.
But you've been doing most of the DJing for the Plumps, though, right? Because Andy took a time off.
Yeah. So, but just before lockdown, he was losing the buzz of DJing a bit, but still his passion for music. He's a music fanatic and a breakbeat fanatic, and loves making that music. He just makes music for all day. It's just what he does, and he loves it. He breathes it. He lives in his studio, like literally his bedroom's next to the studio, and that's not stopped at all. But just before lockdown, it was getting a bit tenuous for him. Some of the shows, the travel, being away from his partner, and he just during lockdown, he's like, I need a break from it. And fortunately for me, it's never been. Although it's a duo, obviously we're in a duo. I was DJing on my own before we met. And also, like the first time I toured Australia as Plump DJs was on my own. And then when we went to the States the first time, a lot of those shows were solo. A lot of the long haul shows I've done has been solo. And I've always done the odd solo show here and there. So I've just built on that, really. And I've seemed to be getting really warm reception out and about when I'm playing. I'm definitely getting results from the shows. And I'm feeding back to Andy well, and we're making some great new music off the back of that. And there seems to be a kind of a better understanding of, like where we are as a team. You're more suited and prefer doing this, and I'm more suited and prefer doing that. So in a way, we're doing more of what we prefer to do and better at, in a way. And I think that seems to be showing, really. So yeah, we're in a good place. I can't really grumble. You get the odd question, where's Andy? And rightly so, but it's for good reason. He's taking a break, and we're both loving it. So,
well, my last question for you, I always like to ask my DJ, producer, or musicians when they come on, your ultimate festival lineup for a Friday, Saturday, Sunday night, alive or dead, and it's banned as well.
Oh, crikey, that's a tough one. I couldn't even begin to do that. I'm a big one on sort of programming. I like things to be progressive. Like, you want something soulful on the Sunday, you know what I mean? And you want to go big on the Friday. And Saturday needs to be more sophisticated. But yeah, I really couldn't even begin to get into that. I'm just going to sort of turn around in somersaults as soon as I start. But I mean, some of the bands I grew up with are, still really, like, I grew up with my dad's records, so Crosby, Stills and Nash and Roxy Music, Jerry Rafferty, these kind of, and the Stones and the Beatles, and then on my mum's soul records. And then the 80s soul, I was really into productions by Jerry Jam and Terry Lewis, legendary, artists. And then, all the music I've sort of developed through, really. So it's a tough one. I think I'll have to come back to you on that. I don't think I can just pull it out. My head's in a spin just trying to work it out.
I probably should have messaged you.
I think so.
Yeah. I kind of did the same with Pete Gooding, and he was like, I can't answer that right now. So usually I'll send a message like, can you do your homework on your ultimate one? And I just totally forgot. But yeah, it's a tough one because you've got so many like musical tastes, and you can't really, I mean, some people can just reel it off, like they'll say,
Yeah.
Days, the Stones, or the Beatles, and Marvin Gaye on a Sunday, maybe Elton John in between. But yeah, it is a tough question when it's.
It's a good one though. It's a good one. I think it'd be good to sort of if you're having trouble sleeping, you could sort of imagine each day in your head, couldn't you, and use it as a bit of a mantra, a way to get to sleep. Just to working it out.
Well, Lee, it's been an absolute honour. I'm so glad you guys are still making music and still DJing.
Oh, thanks.
And like I said, the breakbeat scene seems to be on the up again. And it's nice to hear all these new tracks from these new producers that are coming out the woodwork, and whether they're young or old. And I love the day breaks thing. I really do, because I wish there was something like this over in the States. I'm getting on as well. I like my sleep these days, and I check in with the UK every now and again, and I see that there's more like day raves as well.
Yes.
Because people just they do have lives, and the whole thing is you can't stay up till 4 o'clock in the morning, and then you've got kids. Kids don't care if you went out the night before. You got to get up. You got to put that super cape on and be super mum and take care of your kids. So the day breaks, get it over here. Get that over there, mate. And I'll be there.
I don't think it'll be long. We've got the first one in Brighton sold out in a week. We've got Brixton New Year's Day. We've got 2 happening in Australia during our tour. I think one in Canberra, one in Hobart. I think it's Hobart. I need a quote on that. There's a potential for Dubai. I got a call from one of my promoter friends in Dubai looking at that. A friend in Dublin wants to put one on. So it's been quite unanimous. And that'll be not necessarily huge shows, sometimes just 1 or 2 DJs and more intimate venues. But it's been something that's been missing for so long. And when you're into your clubbing, you can effectively do that in your 20s, really. When you start to get your careers kick off and your relationships kick off and you start having families in your 30s, suddenly clubbing does not work. And Annie Mac was recently, pioneered her Before Midnight thing. And it was like, why didn't, I've been thinking about doing something like that forever. And it's just unanimous. It's a no-brainer. We were out on the weekend and so many of my friends undeniably went, I'll have a piece of that. And we went to a nice pub for lunch before, went to the Ministry of Sound. Atmosphere is fantastic. All of us had loads of energy as well, because we weren't there after a big pub session. We'd gone there, nice bit of food in us, a couple of drinks, and we were really full of energy. And then we left, and it felt like 3 a.m, but it was 10 o'clock at night. And we were like, can we go to another pub just to wind down for a bit? We found a couple more pubs, left those pubs just before finish, and we were all back at home by midnight, 1:30, 12. And it was like, what a great night. And then all managed to do, get our responsibilities sorted the next day to some level of, some decent level, and lots to like. For me as a performer and for my friends as ravers, it was just loads of boxes ticked. So we will definitely be over your shores soon.
Good. Please go check out Plump DJs at their website, plumpdjs.co.uk, for all their music and touring and stuff. But thank you so much, Lee. It's been an absolute pleasure. An hour goes by so quickly when you're talking about things that you enjoy and you love.
Thank you for asking all the right questions. It's been easy for me to talk too much, so I'm sorry if I have.
Well, I mean, that again, the whole reason why I do these episodes is for me just to kind of ask a few questions. I wants to hear me waffle on. A guest that's your story and you're telling it. And that's what I love. I'm like I said, the people that listen to this podcast, I'm just a fan as well, because I'm bringing on people like yourself that I admire, I appreciate. Part of my musical landscape. So thank you again. For everyone listening, tuning in, please like and subscribe, put your notifications on, and we'll see you next time.